Hey everyone, welcome to my channel. I hope you're all having a fantastic day. Kelly Ripa clocked an audience member's unenthused reaction to Mark Consuelos' opinion about walkable cities on Monday morning's live episode. The talk show returned from the July 4th weekend to the tune of an audience who maybe could have used an extra day of rest from the holiday stretch, as one particular studio attendee showed her disapproval for the co-host conversation during the broadcast. After Consuelos brought up a talking point about walkable cities and a recent survey that hailed Philadelphia as the nation's best for walking, Ripa pushed back against the result. What? I'm a big walker in Philly. I'm from South Jersey, so I know the area well, but I'd say it's less of a walking city than New York, Ripa observed. It's not a grid. It's all over the place. Consuelos continued with the list, with cities in Rhode Island, Providence, Vermont, Burlington, and Ohio, Columbus, finishing out the list. As Consuelos spoke about the city of Columbus, the audience could be heard clapping in the background. Really? Really? You know what I think is a nice, walkable city? Ann Arbor, Consuelos said. Not Columbus, Ohio? Ripa then looked off screen toward the audience and asked, Did you just give us the thumbs down, lady? What are you, from Ohio? The audience member then yelled, Columbus, before the hosts moved on, indicating that their beloved New York City landed at number 10 on the list. I like cities where you can walk, Ripa said, finishing the segment. Listen, I walk around Los Angeles. It's a weird experience because to me it's such a walkable city, and yet nobody walks there. So you have to ask yourself, why is nobody walking? Monday's moment came days after Ripa called out another audience member last week. Sign up for Entertainment Weekly's free daily newsletter to get breaking TV news, exclusive first looks, recaps, reviews, interviews with your favorite stars, and more. During a discussion about younger generations using artificial intelligence to do everyday things, Ripa and Consuelos singled out a young audience member who admitted to using AI to help her end a romantic relationship. The studio lights felt like a small sun above the rows of folding chairs. They hummed with a constant dry warmth that worked its way into hairlines and into the bones of anyone who'd been waiting long enough. Clara had learned, after a handful of live tapings and an embarrassingly large collection of souvenir mugs, that the lights had a personality of their own. They flattered the earnest, made the anxious glow, and magnified the tiniest gestures into declarations. She'd traveled 3 hours that morning from Columbus. The bus had been late. A rainstorm had chased them out of the Ohio countryside and turned the city into a mosaic of umbrellas and taxis. She had, in the cramped comfort of a seat near the back, rehearsed a dozen versions of a reaction she might have, depending on what Kelly and Mark said. She imagined laughing along, applauding melted together with everyone else, or on the rare, thrilling chance that something outrageous was said, shaking her head with the slow, theatrical disapproval of someone who'd watched the tide of pop culture ebb and flow and found it wanting. She had not rehearsed the thumbs down. By the time she found the seat assigned to her, the studio had already settled into the peculiar rhythm of a live morning show audience, a low murmur of acquaintances, the clack of fingernails on phones as people shared photos of the set, the occasional burst of a laugh that seemed to come from nowhere and to nowhere at once. Clara, wearing the soft navy sweater she always reserved for travel, and a pair of sneakers that had a groove worn into the left sole by a lifetime of sidewalks in Columbus, felt an odd mixture of feverish excitement and protective nostalgia. Columbus had been her city for almost a decade, its grid of neighborhoods, the way winter gave way slowly to a hesitant spring, the small bookstores with handwritten posters for readings, and Mark's offhand dismissal of the city as less walkable than Ann Arbor felt like a nudge at a bruise. She wasn't from Columbus originally. She'd grown up in a town that had only 2 stoplights, and a diner with a photograph of the town's founders hanging over the pie case. Columbus had been, to her, the first place where streets could be more than a route to a destination. They were a kind of map for a life she was still sketching in. She'd spent autumns getting lost among college kids and office workers and retirees all moving under one low sky, a city stitched together by commerce and coffee shops and a stubborn civic pride that occasionally made its residents defensive in the gentlest of ways. So when Mark said it, light as a weather report and with a kind of confidence that only comes from a man who has been both an actor and a talk show co-host, Clara felt it as a small, incandescent injustice. He said, "Not Columbus, Ohio," in a tone that made it sound like the city had been guilty of some personal failing. She saw the way the person next to her, a woman in a red coat who traveled from New Jersey, smiled politely and shrugged. She felt, in her chest, a sudden, bright allegiance. It was not a calculated moment. She became aware of herself becoming more visible, of being visible, and then of deciding to make a sound larger than the inside of her head. She hadn't meant to be rude. She hadn't meant to change the texture of the broadcast. She had meant to say just one word, a shout of hometown pride, Columbus. But when her voice climbed from that ordinary scale into the cavernous, echoing space that the studio created, something else happened. Her hand, almost of its own accord, rose with it. It formed a thumb pointing down, not because she wanted to condemn Mark or the hosts or the playful banter of morning television, but because at that microsecond, the gesture felt right, like an accompaniment to the bark of her voice, the physical punctuation of her small protest. Kelly Ripa, who had an energy like an electric jolt and a smile that could make a camera lens squint, pivoted. She did so with the same immediacy she used for tackling a fan question or a heartening human interest segment. The lights caught her hair. The audience watched. The camera's lens, as if smelling drama, angled. Just enough. "Did you just give us the thumbs down, lady?" she asked, and the sentence folded over the studio like a question thrown into a well. For a second, the world contracted to the space between Clara and every set of eyes in the room. The cameras were not like the city's streets. They had a focus that could feel invasive, as though they had been built to record moments of human fallibility and freeze them for later. Clara's hand hesitated at the top of its arc, a thumb suspended like a punctuation mark. She could have put her hand down, swallowed the shout, laughed it off. She could have pretended the whole thing was an accident. Instead, she bowed farther into the microphone of her own smallness and shouted the place name she carried. Columbus, she called again, not with defiance, but with a kind of bright surrender. It was an offering, a claim. As soon as the sound came out, she noticed the shift in the room. Smiles lengthened to visible amusement. Someone near the camera laughed outright. A man behind her threw his head back. The hosts moved on quickly, because that's what they do. A live show is a river where one must paddle without stopping to fix the oars. The moment was swept into the current. Kelly turned the thread into a playful lament. "Listen, I walk around Los Angeles. It's a weird experience because to me it's such a walkable city, and yet nobody walks there." And then, as if to underline the transience of the incident, the segment shifted. Yet the clip existed now. And on the internet, anything that is visible is also immortal until someone decides it isn't. Clara would later learn the weight of that little movement. That evening, when she slipped back onto the late bus with a sandwich and a paper bag and the exhaustion that follows a day of heightened visibility, someone in the seat across from her had already seen the clip. They tapped their phone and navigated to the video with a practiced thumb. "There you are," the person said with a warm grin, and Clara laughed in that private, brittle way one laughs when surprised into recognition. The clip spread like any other piece of morning show ephemera, fun to people who had nothing to lose by laughing at it, and oddly significant to people who had reasons to take pride in a city. The comments that streamed in had their predictable varieties. Jokes about Midwestern sensibilities, affectionate teasing from viewers who loved a bit of hometown passion, and a handful of mean-spirited quips that made Clara's chest tighten for a day and then loosen as the outrage settled into the usual dull residue. She scrolled, though she swore she wouldn't, and found a thread of people from Columbus defending its sidewalks, its neighborhoods, The winter bent courage of people who kept walking even when snow had a mind of its own.